Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
So, Andrew Dicecco, Football at 4. Let's retrack ourselves back to that side of things because the Eagles won this week 4-6, and they did it in an impressive fashion. Let's start with Nick Ciriani and the growth he has shown as a play caller and head coach.
Yeah. I mean, it's very impressive. I mean, he's improved by leaps and bounds, Mike, as far as just having a great feel of utilizing his personnel. He even in the running game, I mean, instead of just lining up and running it like he's done the past couple of weeks, he was running out of different formations to sort of throw off a tough Denver Broncos front. And he mixed in the passing game because obviously the Denver Broncos were scheming to get Jalen Hurts to take away the running element and make Jalen Hurts sort of win with his arm. And he did that quite well in the first half of that game and made some really nice throws. It's just him finding this balance, and he's really starting to find his own identity as a play caller. And it's really interesting to watch his evolution as a first-year coach because everything seems to be coming together at the right time.
Yeah, I know that, he ran the ball 40 times this week, and that's something that we all wondered. Was he going to stick with it? And I guess the question moving forward is once Miles Sanders returns and how this all works out, because it's funny, I did a show a couple weeks ago when I talked about maybe Sanders being out will kind of have him scale the offense back. And you wonder if him scaling the offense back help him kind of backwards himself into what this team is good at. And getting Sanders back, does he stick with this? And does Sanders become the guy who gets a lot of these carries?
Well, based on now we have 3 games here to really see. Sirianni's really he didn't revert back to that pass-happy foundation that he sort of prided himself on in the early part of the season. So, I have a feeling that he's going to continue to stick with what's working instead of reverting back to obviously what was putting them into that early season hole. And that is, there is a role for Miles Sanders on this team. However, I think it behooves him to stick with the formula of Jordan Howard and Boston Scott and mix in Miles Sanders because he is the most dynamic running back on the roster. So find spots to utilize him because he does offer home run ability. But I think right now, Jordan Howard and Boston Scott, just that no nonsense between the tackle running. It also added a physical element that the team was lacking. I think that they need to continue to stick with that, but also sprinkle in some Miles Sanders. I do think that Kenny Gainwell will probably be the odd man out because it's very hard to work in 4 different running backs, let alone dress 4 running backs on game day.
Right. Now, you said there is a role for Sanders. Is that you're saying almost, Boston Scott's getting half the carries. They're almost splitting them in half, 12 and 11. Would you rather see those 11 carries go to Sanders, or would you like to see Scott continue to get that volume of touches?
I think Boston Scott has proven that he deserves those carries because he's doing more with them. He's maximizing his opportunities. And Miles Sanders, for as explosive as a player as he is, Mike, some of his biggest detriment is that sometimes he's quick to bounce it outside, look for the big play, and he loses yards. And all of a sudden, instead of, 2nd and 6, it's now, 2nd and 11 or something to that effect because he's too quick to do that dancing behind the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden the offense is in a hole, and then you have to lean on the passing game, and things start to spiral out of control that way. He's not a very rhythmic runner. He's a volatile player, so that's the nature of his style, right? That's why I think that if you sprinkle in and are very calculated with his touches, he can be very effective. However, I don't think that he can be a bell cow running back.
The interesting thing with him is he offers something that the other 2 really don't, which is he can hit the home run. He can hit you the 75-yard run. And if the way the offensive line is blocking and providing gaping holes right now, if Sanders gets through that hole and gets to that second level, you can see some big-time runs out of him, which kind of is interesting because, he showed a couple flashes this year, but he hasn't had the big run. He had a couple of those big runs last year. But as we know, Andrew, in those flashes, he was only getting 4 or 5 carries. He wasn't getting 11, 15 carries. And you would think the way this line is blocking, he might be able to hit a big run or 2.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I also think that you've seen what having two guys who are just real in Boston Scott and Jordan Howard, who don't do a whole lot of fancy footwork and at the line of scrimmage they kind of just see the hole, hit it, and accelerate to that second level. That's really what's needed because they fall forward for positive yards. They don't put the offense in a hole. Yes, you're right. Boston Scott or Miles Sanders does have that home run ability, which is why I think you need to utilize him. Another reason why I think that Kenny Gainwell might be the odd man out is because Boston Scott and Miles Sanders can catch the football as receivers out of the backfield. So that sort of renders Kenny Gainwell sort of moot. I mean, you can kind of leave him inactive if you don't want to dedicate 4 active spots on game day to 4 running backs.
All right, Andrew Dicecco, Football at 4. Over at InsideTheBirds.com, you wrote about Devante Smith and the game that he kind of had. But really, this is a guy who I really thought had the first game where he looked like the game kind of slowed down for him, where he kind of just let the game come to him. He made that catch, but he had some other plays in that game that really showed a guy who, for whatever reason, the first couple games, he made some plays, and you weren't like, man, this guy's a bust, but he hadn't kind of stood out. I thought this game he really jumped off the screen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, Mike, was him sort of finding his way because absent Dallas Goedert and or in the early part of the season, Miles Sanders before he got hurt, there wasn't a whole lot there wasn't a strong supporting cast, and it was Devante Smith and Dallas Goedert and Miles Sanders and everyone else. And I think now he's sort of found his footing, so to speak, in the NFL, and he's able to play a little bit, freely. And I think it also comes with his that rekindled connection with Jalen Hurts. I think everything's starting to come together at the right time. And, he's really impressed. He's always been a great route runner. He's always been someone that can separate with regularity. That hasn't been his issue. It's been more so missed opportunities from Jalen Hurts not seeing the field particularly well. And he hasn't really had a lot of contested catch opportunities to really prove that he could do that. And, I mean, now we saw a sample of everything that he's able to do. You saw the short to intermediate work on that touchdown to get free in the middle of the end zone. But how about that 36-yard touchdown catch over his former teammate at Alabama, Patrick Surtain? That proved his ability to go up and get the football when it wasn't necessarily right. I mean, with the defender all over him, that was great coverage by Pat Surtain. And he came out with that football and got in bounds, and he just really showed his body control and his ability to attack the catch point. I mean, that was just a phenomenal job by 2 young players that the Eagles hope will be in their plans for the next 10 years. Obviously, Devante Smith will, but Jalen Hurts, that was a nice throw as well.
It was. And yesterday, Nick Ciriani was asked about, hey, what do you say to those people who has already come to the conclusion that Jalen Hurts can't be a franchise quarterback? And Nick Sirianni said, well, watch the last 3 games. Do you feel that the Eagles, I don't want to say have made a decision, but are leaning one way towards Jalen Hurts?
Every throw that Jalen Hurts makes this season is going to be dissected and overanalyzed regardless. But any objective observer would be remiss to ignore his growth and development, as incremental as it may seem at times, Mike. But, I mean, in decision-making, ball placement, and pocket presence, these are areas of his game that have improved immensely in the past 3 weeks. Obviously, his elevated performance is directly correlated with a shift in offensive philosophy, which we touched on. Mm-hmm. And I really do think that, he puts the work in. I mean, that's been stated multiple times. He has the respect of his veteran teammates, and now the intangibles are starting to surface, and you're starting to see him build some continuity in the offense and find us. And he's in a system right now with Nick Sirianni that's really starting to accent his strengths. And I think he looks a lot more comfortable out there. I think he's making proper decisions, and he's starting to come into his own a little bit here. And, you can't help but wonder if he was fueled a little bit by Howie Roseman observing Kenny Pickett and Sam Howell on last Thursday. Sometimes those things can, galvanize a player, and you start to see things sort of come together. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts has shown a lot, and I think that he's trending upwards. And, the one thing to consider, to remember, Mike, is everyone wants, this is like a microwave society. Everybody wants instantaneous results, and that was never going to be the case with Jalen Hurts. However, you are seeing promise, you are seeing improvements, and that's all you can really ask for. They're in position right now for a potential wild card spot if they continue this trajectory, and that connection with Devante Smith should leave a lot of people excited about the future of this franchise.
All right, I agree with a lot of that. The Hurts, I think he's growing. I thought he played his best game, maybe period, on Sunday. I thought the throw he made to Smith, the throw that he made to Watkins that he dropped, and the throw that he made to Goddard, those three were three different types of throws, three different types of positioning with the feet, and I thought all of them required a lot of patience. I mean, the rollout to Smith, he has to reset his feet and then let that thing go. I mean, it's easy to roll out there and then try to rush that thing. The throw he made to Goddard, I thought that was maybe the best play he made of the game. Goddard ends up getting ripped on the play, but that wasn't because the throw was bad. That's just the way the tackle. And then the where he placed that ball on Quez Watkins, I mean, that's malpractice for Watkins to drop that. I thought those three were really three different examples of three different throws that I don't know that he makes earlier in the season.
Exactly, and that's how you sort of have to evaluate it. Would he make those plays in week 2, 3, 4, 5? No. I mean, a lot of times he's going to prematurely leave the pocket and pick up 5, 10 yards with his legs. This time, or now he's starting to let routes develop. He's working off his first read, and you're starting to see him process things a little bit faster, and he's seeing the entire field. Are there going to be plays he's going to leave on the field? Yeah, that's going to happen. But, I mean, he's right where I think the Eagles would like him to be at this point, and I think he's trending in the right direction. So, I mean, it's very encouraging to see these things, Mike, and I think it's only going to improve. The one thing that if you're the Eagles you need to look at is you have Devante Smith, and he's starting to break out, and that's all good and well. But if Dallas Goedert can't go next week, the Eagles really don't have a lot of – there's no other competent, reliable passing receiving options that he can really lean on. And I mean, Quez Watkins and Jalen Reagor, they're secondary players. I mean, Quez Watkins dropped a phenomenal pass in the end zone. I mean, he needs playmakers around him. And right now, there's only a handful that he can really count on.
Hey, this could be a jump starting of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's career as maybe like running some of the Goddard routes. I don't know. Talking with Andrew Dicecco. Somehow J.J. Arcega-Whiteside got hurt in that game the other day. I know he had been injured, but he ended up getting hurt again in that game. All right, some of the keys to the game that you looked at. T.J. Edwards, Davion Taylor against the tight ends. Now, the tight ends both had Font had a good game. Albert O had a good game. But what are you seeing from the – because I thought the linebackers actually played much better this week.
Yeah, they're aggressive, they're instinctive, and they're tenacious. And they're playing with a physicality that hasn't been there since in the early part of the season. Hasn't really been there since the Detroit game. And that's when you started to see that that combination really sort of invigorate that defense that was sort of didn't have an identity, and it was also very passive, and their running backs were having success getting to that second level. Offensive linemen were getting to that second level and extinguishing these players, rendering them ineffective. And now you're starting to see guys like T.J. Edwards take on these pulling guards, attack downhill, and Davion Taylor, who's very fast and athletic, and he's always around the football. And I think that the more that you see him out there, the more he's starting to pick up things and learn on the job. And, I mean, again, we talk about how it's encouraging to see that from Jalen Hurts. Well, Davion Taylor and T.J. Edwards, they're complementary players in an ideal system. But right now, that's the best of what the Eagles have. And they're maximizing that, and they're getting better. And I think that makes the defense better. And I think ultimately they're going to help improve and solidify that area throughout until they make changes to that position and tweak it in the offseason.
Yeah, I know last week John Gannon's defense, and John Gannon specifically, was much maligned. So I'll ask you, Andrew, did he make adjustments, or did he just play a defense, an offense that was just not very good?
I mean, you saw some press with the corners, and you saw some pressure with the defensive line. Obviously, Derek Barnett got the only sack, but you saw Teddy Bridgewater was under a lot more duress than pressure than the Eagles had been applying since really the Detroit game. And I think it was just more so of Teddy Bridgewater is who he is. He's not really going to push the ball down the field. So you sort of shrink the field on him. You get pressure bearing down on him. Now, the running game in the second and third quarter in particular, they started to get gashed in that area again. And you started to say, oh, here we go. What is he going to do to sort of combat that? What kind of changes is he going to be able to make at this point to stop Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon? But I thought overall, that the defense played more cohesive, and I think that that's starting to come with just a little bit of tinkering from Jonathan Gannon, but also this unit playing together. Now you have Davion Taylor and TJ Edwards there, and I think it's more of a continuity thing, and that's something to watch in the coming weeks.
Yeah, there's they're not facing. I mean, I guess Simeon's going to get the start this week. I mean, and this has kind of been the theme for the Eagles in games that they've won, Andrew, is when the quarterback is just an average guy, for whatever reason, it's a much different game. What is so predicated that one quarterback throws 80%, they go up and down the field, 40 points they've given up twice, and they're not doing much differently. So why is the outcomes and the results so different based on the quarterback?
Well, these upper echelon quarterbacks, they see things faster. They know how to dissect a secondary, and the Eagles, and they know how to sort of work around a defensive line who is very aggressive in the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, when you have a quarterback who's a little bit inexperienced, or they're just not, or they're on that bottom tier like a Trevor Siemian, they don't process things as quickly, and they're keying in on their first read, and you're making them second guess their decision making, and then they tend to be more turnover prone and prone to mistakes. And if it's a younger quarterback like that or an inexperienced one, they're going to try and lean on the running game. So obviously you try to stop the running game and make him win as a passer. And once you do that, guys like Josh Sweat and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, they can sort of pin their ears back and make them accelerate their thought process and force some poor throws.
I want to go back real fast because we didn't discuss this, but it was my fault for not bringing it up. But Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, that left side of the line, just the offensive line in general, how much of what they do has led to the success and the change in the philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, two maulers right there. I think that Jordan Mailata, we all knew that, but I think Landon Dickerson really has come into his own as a run blocker, not as proficient right now as a rookie in pass protection, but as a running, and when he's able to lean in and use his gritty his strength and his nastiness as a road grader, I think the Eagles are really playing to his strength right now, and you're starting to see him just win at the point of attack. And, obviously in the offseason, he's going to have to work on his pass protection. I think right now that's his area of improvement. But, I mean, just that left side of the line has been dominant, especially over the past few weeks. And I think that's only going to continue to get better as the continuity continues on for this final stretch of games.
Yeah, I know that people were saying why Dickerson. He had the injury issues, but I think you're starting to see why the Eagles took him in that second round. They've essentially, Andrew, kind of rebuilt this offensive line quietly right before our very eyes. And that's a lot because last year they needed to play guys like Herbig and Driscoll, and now those guys have a lot of playing experience. So when they get called on, they're ready to go. And, as guys start to age out a little bit like Lane Johnson, we'll see what happens with Brandon Brooks and obviously Jason Kelsey. They have five guys that they probably feel pretty comfortable with.
Yeah, and it's almost like these guys were learning on the job last year, but now all of a sudden, in guys like you look at Driscoll and Nate Herbig, you have competent backups. Andre Dillard, we don't know what his immediate future is going to look like, but right now, I mean, if he had to step in and play left tackle in the absence of Jordan Mailata, that he can do so adequately. I mean, he really impressed in his stint as a starter this season. I mean, they have a lot of depth, but then obviously their starting unit is very, very formidable. One of the best in football, I would say. And getting Brandon Brooks back into that mix is going to really, for this last stretch of games to make that playoff push. I mean, that's going to be a monumental addition to the team right now. And right now, their offensive line is their strongest unit on the team right now. And it's something that you really need, especially as the weather gets colder. You're starting to lean on that running game. I mean, it's a different feeling to see an Eagles offensive line at full strength right now.
So far-fetched to say playoffs at this point. Wait and see, or do you think this team will show consistency over the final month and a half of the season?
I think there's enough veterans on this team that can help guide the young players along the way. And you have a young player like a Devante Smith who is very focused, very driven, very detail-oriented, the first guy in the complex. Jalen Hurts, who is he's a tireless competitor. He always is in the complex studying film and working on his areas of improvement. I think that the young players that they do have, combined with the veteran players that the Eagles already have, I think that's a good mix of players who know what it takes to win, and I think it's going to keep them focused and hungry each and every week for this. And they know that the playoffs are a realistic possibility here, and I think that they're going to be able to capitalize on some poor play in the NFC East. And I mean, I wouldn't say the playoffs are out of the conversation, Mike. I think they can snag one of the final spots, and you know, things can get a lot interesting here in December and January.
All right, they'll be back on Thursday here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN for another edition of Football at 4. All right, Andrew, take care, man.
See you, man.
That's Andrew Dicecco here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. And, of course, that is brought to you every day, 4 o'clock, Football at 4 by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long, Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Heritage Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com.